picture a normal Tuesday morning, right? You head to the airport for a business trip, but the departure boards are just glowing blue screens.
Yeah, totally did.
Exactly. You try to buy a coffee, but the point of sale card reader is entirely offline. And then, the news alerts start filtering in.
Right, the really concerning ones.
Yeah, hospital heart monitors going dark in the middle of surgeries, massive grocery store inventory systems just freezing, maritime port logistics. I mean, the massive digital cranes that unload cargo ships, they just stop moving.
It's a complete standstill. And I mean, we all watched a version of this happen just last year.
We did. And the official story at the time was, well, it was a software glitch, right? Like a routine update from a major cybersecurity vendor that just accidentally bricked the global system.
Right. The narrative presented to the public was very much one of human error. A localized mistake that somehow cascaded into a global transportation and financial standstill.
Yeah, and oops.
Exactly. And oops. The incident was categorized as an unfortunate anomaly in an otherwise robust digital infrastructure.
But what if you found out that the exact sequence of events, the highly specific vulnerabilities, and the immediate global policy response? Well, what if all of that was mathematically modeled, drafted, and published by massive international think tanks months before that Tuesday morning ever happened?
Which is wild to think about.
It really is. So, welcome to the deep dive. Today, we are taking you into the architecture of that Tuesday morning. We have a massive stack of source material sitting right in front of us, declassified dossiers, white papers, institutional mandates, all centered around something called Project Cyber-Polygon.
Right.
Our mission today is to figure out how theoretical disaster modeling for a digital crisis somehow transformed into a literal blueprint for global policy. And just to be super clear up front, the sources we're looking at today, they are not internet rumors.
No, not at all.
We are analyzing the granular mathematical documents drafted by elite global policy groups.
Establishing a baseline here is really crucial for our analysis. What we are examining today is not about conspiracy. We are looking at the statistical anomalies of a crisis simulation. Specifically, an institutional simulation that perfectly mirrored a real-world infrastructural collapse within a 12-month window.
Wow.
So our focus is strictly on the math, the policy frameworks, and the sequence of events exactly as they are thoroughly documented in these papers.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because before we look at what actually happened in the real world, we really need to understand exactly what these think tanks were simulating in the first place.
Yeah, the theory behind it.
Exactly. The foundational document we have here outlines a scenario they called a cyber pandemic.
Right, and the term cyber pandemic is used in these papers to describe a targeted, cascading failure of the global internet protocol infrastructure.
So different from just a normal hack.
Very different. Unlike a localized hack, where, say, a single company has its data compromised and isolated, this simulation modeled a contagion. It looked at the precise mechanisms of how a failure in one node of the network would automatically trigger failures in connected nodes, basically pulling down the entire digital grid piece by piece.
Like dominoes.
Exactly like dominoes.
Right.
And to do this, the authors built what they call threat vector architectures.
Yeah, we see that phrase a lot in these dossiers. And to put that in everyday terms for you listening, a threat vector architecture isn't just like a list of bad things that could happen.
No.
It is a comprehensive mathematical map of every single route an attack or a failure could take through a system. Think of civil engineers building a computer model to stress test every single rivet on a suspension bridge under hurricane winds.
Right.
These think tanks did that, but for the entire global internet.
And the mathematical models revealed a really fascinating structural reality about modern networks. Because the focus of the simulation was not on some sophisticated hacker brute forcing the mainframes of the Pentagon or a major multinational bank.
Which is usually what you'd see in the movies.
Right, exactly. But the models showed that those primary targets are far too heavily fortified. So the focus was instead heavily placed on third-party vulnerabilities.
Ah, the vendors.
Yes. Massive corporations and sovereign governments are hit through much smaller, less secure vendors that are embedded deep within their digital supply chain.
I mean, it's like realizing the bad guys aren't going to storm the heavily guarded front gate of the fortress, right? They're just going to steal the uniform of the guy delivering the coffee.
That's a great way to put it.
Because once he's inside the building, scanning his badge at every single checkpoint, he inherently has the keys to the kingdom.
Exactly.
But reading through these white papers, I mean, the sheer scale of the simulation is really what stands out to me.
Yeah.
Like, they mapped out the exact number of days it would take for grocery store shelves to empty completely due to just-in-time inventory systems failing.
Yeah, the granularity is terrifying. They identified highly specific vulnerabilities in maritime shipping communication channels, too.
Oh.
Yeah, they understood the mechanism of electronic data interchange systems, meaning they knew exactly how the software that tells a port which cargo container is on which ship would fail.
Leaving, what, thousands of tons of goods just sitting motionless in the water?
Exactly, just paralyzed. They even pinpointed the precise moment using sociological algorithms when public panic would reach a threshold requiring emergency government intervention.
But, I mean, think tanks run tabletop exercises all the time, right?
Yeah.
They simulate asteroid strikes, solar flares, biological outbreaks. What makes this specific Project Cyber-Polygon simulation stand out among hundreds of standard tabletop exercises is the transition from theoretical modeling to real-world manifestation.
Yes. And this brings us directly to the logistics outage that occurred last year.
Right.
An event that perfectly mirrored Phase 2 of the Cyber-Polygon simulation.
Phase 2, yeah.
Yeah. And to understand how the real-world event mirrored the simulation, we have to look at the mechanism of the failure. The forensic data from last year's outage showed a failure in the continuous deployment pipeline of a central vendor.
Let's break down that mechanism for a second, because continuous deployment pipeline sounds incredibly technical, but it's actually the invisible engine of the modern internet.
It really is.
Like when a software company wants to fix a bug or patch a security hole, they don't mail you a CD-ROM anymore. Developers write lines of code, and an automated system pushes that update directly to the core operating system of millions of machines globally.
Right.
In a matter of minutes, without any human oversight on the receiving end.
And the speed of that automated pipeline is entirely necessary for modern cybersecurity. I mean, if a new virus is detected, security firms need to patch every computer on Earth instantly.
Sure.
However, that exact speed is what bypasses isolated testing environments. When that central cybersecurity vendor pushed their routine update last year, a flaw in the code was instantly deployed to the kernel level of millions of systems.
Millions of endpoints were disabled globally. And when we say endpoints, we aren't just talking about office laptops, you know?
No, not at all.
An endpoint is any device physically interacting with a network. It's the airport ticketing kiosk. It's the digital register at the pharmacy.
Yeah.
It's the telemetry screen in the emergency room.
Right.
All of those endpoints suddenly went dark simultaneously.
And what's fascinating here is not just the technical failure itself. I mean, hardware and software fail. That is a constant in information technology.
Yeah.
What is truly revealing is the immediate institutional response to that failure. Within 48 hours of that global outage, while flights were still grounded and financial transactions were still suspended, multiple international regulatory bodies resurrected the exact pre-packaged policy proposals that had been drafted during the theoretical Cyber-Polygon simulation.
Okay, let me push back on this on behalf of the listener, because if I live in a wildfire zone, right, and I buy a comprehensive fire insurance policy and then my house unfortunately burns down, you don't accuse me of arson.
I know.
You congratulate me on being prepared. So if a global think tank spends millions of dollars modeling a specific threat, and then that exact threat happens, isn't it actually a good thing they had a legislative plan ready to go in the drawer? Shouldn't we just be calling this prudent preparation?
Well, that is the logical assumption.
Yeah.
And presenting the pre-packaged policy as prudent preparation is exactly how the response was marketed to the public.
Makes sense.
However, when we analyze the mechanical nature of the proposed solution found in these mandates, that argument structurally falls apart. The mandated legislative solution completely contradicts the most basic foundational principles of information technology security.
Contradicts it. Okay, to understand why the solution contradicts basic security, we have to look at the original architecture of the internet, don't we?
Yes, exactly.
Because decades ago, the early internet projects like ARPANET, it was designed specifically by the military to survive a nuclear strike. And the entire philosophy was based on decentralization.
Exactly. The architecture was built like a vast web of independent roads. If one node, say a massive server farm in New York, is destroyed or compromised, the network doesn't collapse.
It just routes around it.
Right. The routers simply find a new path, sending the data around the damaged area through thousands of other independent nodes. There is no central brain to destroy. Decentralization is the very mechanism that makes the web resilient.
But the Cyber-Polygon simulation itself proved that it was the creeping centralization of third-party vendors that caused the cascading failure in the first place.
Exactly.
Everyone across the globe, from airlines to hospitals, was relying on the exact same continuous deployment pipeline from the exact same vendor.
Yeah.
Yet the mandated legislative solution that rolled out in those 48 hours did not demand a return to a decentralized, resilient network.
No, it didn't.
It demanded absolute network centralization.
Right. And the policy proposals marketed this demand under a highly polished term. They called it digital sovereignty.
Digital sovereignty, it sounds so official.
It does. The phrase sounds protective. It evokes the idea of a nation securing its citizens' private data from foreign adversaries or rogue hackers.
Okay.
But textual analysis of the actual legislative blueprints
Correct.
reveals a very different mechanical reality. Achieving this proposed digital sovereignty necessitates the creation of heavily monitored, closed-loop national internets.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. If the source material actively acknowledges that the centralization of vendors is what caused the crash, demanding more centralization as the cure is an astonishing paradox.
It really is.
I mean, it's like reading a pharmaceutical study that recommends consuming more poison to build an immunity to poison. Or it's like a naval architect looking at a sinking ship, realizing it's sinking because someone removed all the independent, watertight compartments, and confidently proposing that the next ship should just be one massive hollow room.
Yes.
If a single leak happens in that new design, the entire vessel goes down instantly.
And the structural migration toward that massive hollow room is already visible in the data. Critical infrastructure is actively moving away from independent localized servers. We are currently tracking a massive migration of both government databases and corporate logistics systems into the proprietary cloud environments of exactly 3 massive global technology corporations.
Wait, just 3? Why are they doing that if it makes the system more vulnerable to a single point of failure?
It comes down to the economic incentives of scale. Building, cooling, and securing independent server farms is incredibly capital intensive.
Oh, so it's just cheaper.
Vastly cheaper. It is vastly cheaper for a hospital network or a shipping conglomerate to rent space on the existing infrastructure of these massive cloud providers. And the result is that a staggering percentage of the global economy now physically sits on the servers of just 3 companies.
Okay, so it's the digital equivalent of the mafia breaking your window on a Tuesday and then showing up on Wednesday selling you the glass.
Basically, yeah.
First, the think tanks published the white papers detailing exactly how vulnerable the centralized supply chain is. Then the supply chain mysteriously suffers exactly those vulnerabilities, plunging the public into chaos. And finally, the institutions step forward with multi-billion-dollar contracts to secure the system. But their security requires surrendering to a fully centralized, closed-loop network.
Exactly. And when you read the requirements for these closed-loop networks, the concept of security takes on a much broader definition.
How so?
Well, the sources mandate universal digital ID tied directly to biometric data.
Wow.
Yeah. They require the total elimination of online anonymity to ensure every action can be traced to a physical person. And they establish the legal framework for a government kill switch. Basically, provisions allowing authorities to instantly sever the population from the global network under the guise of quarantine during a digital crisis.
But when you look at those requirements, I mean, biometric IDs, closed loops, the elimination of anonymity, it raises a huge logistical question. You can't just mandate that on a normal Tuesday. If a government announced they were building a kill switch for your internet access, people would protest. They don't just hand over their autonomy for no reason. So how do these policy papers plan to actually implement this architecture without massive public pushback?
Well, the dossiers rely heavily on a sociological and political concept known as manufactured consent.
Manufactured consent.
Right. You cannot force a democratic population to accept pervasive surveillance during times of peace and stability.
People wouldn't stand for it.
Exactly. However, if a localized version of a modeled threat manifests in reality, if flights are grounded, if citizens cannot access the funds in their bank accounts, if emergency services are degraded, you create an acute state of societal panic.
And under those conditions, the public doesn't reject the digital constraints. They actively ask for them.
Precise.
I mean, When people are scared they won't be able to buy groceries, they will trade almost any amount of privacy for a return to normalcy. The surveillance grid is just, offered as the only umbrella available in a massive storm.
And in forensic policy analysis, you always follow the leverage. You look at who structurally benefits from the proposed solutions.
The three big tech companies.
Exactly. The primary beneficiaries outlined in these mandates are those three massive technology conglomerates who are suddenly securing multi-billion-dollar state-sponsored contracts to build the identity verification systems. Concurrently, state security apparatuses gain unprecedented, frictionless access to private data streams under the justification of monitoring the network for the next contagion.
So reading through these declassified geopolitical dossiers, a really highly revealing pattern emerges in the vocabulary.
Yes, the wording is very specific.
The language isn't about shielding the citizen from harm. The word control is used far more frequently than the word protection.
Exactly.
It is entirely about managing the flow of the network.
And that management explicitly extends beyond just blocking malicious software or unauthorized code. The simulation documentation factored in misinformation as a primary threat vector during a systemic crisis.
Misinformation.
Yes. The proposed solution within the new centralized architecture includes the automated algorithmic suppression of unauthorized narratives.
Wow. So if there is a crisis, the system they are building is inherently designed to automatically throttle, shadow ban, or just outright delete information that doesn't align with the official institutional broadcast.
Right.
They're treating unapproved human communication with the exact same protocols they use to quarantine a computer virus.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the push for network centralization is not strictly about defending against malicious code. That is just the necessary public justification to achieve manufactured consent.
Right.
The institutional mandates reveal that this is effectively a publicly filed structural mechanism. It is designed to control the narrative and meticulously regulate information flow during times of institutional stress or geopolitical instability.
So what does this all mean? We have walked through the math, the simulations, the continuous deployment mechanisms, and the policy mandates. We have to ask ourselves, and I'm asking you, listening to this right now, are we witnessing global institutions genuinely trying to secure a fragile digital ecosystem from an inevitable cyber pandemic? Or are they using the specter of a crisis to treat freedom of information and your personal autonomy as a security vulnerability that simply needs to be patched out of the system?
Well, if we impartially distill the core takeaway from these dossiers, white papers, and mandates, the documentation shows a concrete, long-term structural shift.
Okay.
The era of the decentralized, resilient, independent web is being systematically dismantled. We are transitioning into a highly centralized, strictly monitored digital grid. And the data shows this transition is actively being accelerated by the very crisis simulations designed to study it.
And this isn't just an abstract debate about computer architecture, right? This is about protecting your wealth, your privacy, and your autonomy in the modern world. You need to understand this threat vector architecture because your daily life, your finances, and your communications are completely entangled in it.
They really are.
The next time the network goes down, the next time flights are grounded and the grocery store registers stop working and the proposed solution demands your digital sovereignty and your biometric data, well, you now know exactly which playbook they are reading from. You understand the mechanisms behind the outage.
Right, because the architecture for the next era of digital governance has already been drafted. It has been tested in these simulations. The economic incentives have pushed the infrastructure into the hands of a few central conglomerates, and the policy framework is currently being deployed.
Let me leave you with one final thought to mull over, building on everything we've uncovered in this papers today. If the architecture for this centralized grid is already being deployed, and if every piece of consumed media, every financial transaction, and every online interaction is tied to a verified digital identity, what happens when the automated algorithmic suppression systems, the ones explicitly designed to stop a contagion, decide that a simple decentralized conversation between two friends is a threat vector? If the internet now has a literal switch, who exactly gets to hold the key?